we are here to talk about faces behind data, and specifically about groups of people, and today we'll focus on older people, who are left from data processes, data collection and publication of data. But before we launch into the most exciting presentation of this forum, we decided to do our own little data collection experiment right here, right now. So please get ready, and Dama will give all the details.
So since we're a democratic forum here, we thought of doing a very democratic exercise. So if you whip out your mobile phones or use your laptops and go to slido.com and type in the code 3777, you will see a question that we want to ask you. And for that particular scenario, we want you to imagine you being 40 years from now. So at just 40 years to your current age, don't think about how old you will be, because that's what we're here for, to talk about older people and data. And the question that we expect you to answer is, do you expect to have a pension? And the possibilities of answers are yes, no, or I don't know. Quite frankly, I would say I expect to have a pension, but will it be sufficient? And considering the answers that are coming in, apparently 54% say no, that you won't have a pension, 37% saying yes, so it's a bit coming up now, but it looks like that the majority of people actually think that you won't have a pension.
Well, and it's an interesting result, because according to statistics from International Labour Organization, currently only 52% of older people receive a pension. Now, the two statistics that we presented here might not be, strictly speaking, comparable. I think the message that we are trying to pose to you is that when we say data on older people and aging, and if we say data on poverty among older people or prevalence of non-communicable diseases among older people, yes, it describes a certain population, but it also has a relationship to us. And because the experiences that we had through our childhood or youth, adulthood, the opportunities or the barriers that we encountered shape our aging experience, and we all age. And aging experience is diverse. So this is the second message, that there is no typical older person. Your aging experience would differ based on your gender, based on your disability, based on where you live, in urban or rural area, or any or other myriads of characteristics. So data needs to capture this diversity. And why we should collect data on older people? Well, there are many reasons why. For example, in 2015, United Nations member states agreed to work together towards achievement of sustainable development goals by 2030. And one of the goals specifically mentions data, and it underlines its importance in delivering those goals. And it asks national statistical offices to produce timely, reliable, disaggregated data by age, gender, disability, location, and other characteristics. But regardless of whether it's a government, civil society, or any other stakeholder, we all need to ensure that that fulfillment and recognition of human rights in relation to collection of data and publication of data. And that means recognizing the principles of human rights-based approach to data, such as groups, such as older people, should be part of the data collection process from start to the beginning, from having an opportunity to comment on the data needs, the appropriate methodological tools, and as well as dissemination, to disaggregation of data by age, sex, disability, and location, to be able to identify inequalities and discrimination, and certainly be able to protect identity and privacy of all people involved. And another point why we need data is to identify those people who are the most vulnerable within the broad group of older people. We need to be able to use this data to inform the programs and policies to reach those left behind, as well as to monitor the government and civil society progress on reaching those groups and monitor transparency and accountability. And now just a brief, very few examples of how older people are being left out of data processes. Violence and abuse is one of the biggest data gaps that we encounter. According to review conducted by World Health Organization, only 17% of countries, 17% of 133 countries have a dedicated survey on violence and abuse. Now, there are other ways, other data tools that we could use to collect data on this topic, but unfortunately they either have age caps, so meaning that data past the age of, for example, past the age of 50 is not being collected, or the data tool does not ask the question at all. Another example is that when we analyze poverty data, the very standard procedure is to look at the total household income or consumption and then divide it by the number of family members. Now, this is not good enough. This is not nuanced enough. We need to be able to consider different income streams, whether it's pension, whether it's from employment, or whether it's remittances. We need to analyze their, how sufficient they are, how adequate they are, and how they interact with one another in order to be able to accurately understand, well, what is the income situation of older people. And the final example is when data is collected on older people, well, sometimes it's not published or it's published not adequately. And this particular slide shows employment rate of older people in Bangladesh. On your left-hand side, the data is disaggregated just into two age cohorts, 60 to 64 and 65 and over, as well as by sex. And on the right-hand side is the data that is disaggregated into 5 age cohorts. So it's much more nuanced, and we can see that even in Bangladesh, older people age 80 plus actually are economically active. And now Dama will talk about what HelpAge is doing to address this problem.
So when it comes to HelpAge working around data, with data, we usually take up a very three-pronged approach, talking about data advocacy, about data collection, but also access to data on older people. When it comes to data advocacy, we always, one of our key messages in there is around including older age groups, age cohorts, to collect data on older people, especially because it does help to inform our programming in particular countries a lot better, in which I will go into a bit more detail a bit later on. But we also have different initiatives that any civil society organization or individual can join. And we have a few very good guidelines on age and disability inclusion in humanitarian response, for example, because it's not only a focus on global development work, but also in humanitarian action. When it comes to data collection, and because obviously it's always nice to be talking about that we need more data, but then also assuring that we actually, as an organization, also collect data on older people. And for these particular instances, we've actually developed a few innovative tools that use means of digital data collection, so it's more rapid, it's more accessible, and real-time information flows a bit faster, around needs assessments for older people in particular health context, in particular nutrition context. So, for example, with the East Africa food and famine crisis right now, we're doing a rapid needs assessment across 4 countries that help us to get a better understanding of what it is actually that older people need. whether we need better food assistance services. Obviously, in a famine, that's a given, but then it's more of a question of what particular intake they need, whether it is around particular nutritional habits or whether it's around livestock that is just not available. When it comes to access to data then, obviously, if we are an organization that already collects data on older people and wants to advocate for more nuanced and better overviews, we also need to make sure that we provide the sort of data sets as well. For these particular purposes, and because within a very digital world, we also need to make sure that even older people are also part of the whole digital transformation process. So you have digital inclusion in terms of older citizen monitoring groups that actually consist of older people monitoring progress for social pensions and see whether governments are actually accountable, and obviously sharing the sort of humanitarian data sets that we have on platforms like Humanitarian Data Exchange. But obviously this list is not exhaustive, so please do come talk to us afterwards if you're interested. In terms of a particular case study, one thing that was a really great success story for us in terms of how a particular data collection, baseline survey, and a vulnerability framework actually informed our programming is in Ukraine. It's also a very interesting country for us to be working in because quite a large proportion of older people is affected by the current crisis. The numbers speak for themselves. It's 3.8 million people who are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance, and over 1 million people of those are actually age 59 and older. But when it comes to the particular needs, whether they need wash, whether they need sanitation, whether they need shelter, or different means of enhancing their emotional well-being, there wasn't a particular clear picture. So HelpAge in Ukraine, actually with funding from OFDA and UNHCR, did this whole vulnerability assessment, and some of the findings are actually quite gruesome in that sense. So for example, we had around shelter, one of the key findings was that 90% of older people are in need of hygiene and other NFI, so non-food item support, whilst only less than 1% have actually received such support from the humanitarian agencies that were operating in that particular area, which shows you that whenever there is no data available, there's also no particular intervention targeting that specific age group. And some other examples were that 81% of older people are actually experiencing various conflict-related psychosocial issues, which, given the context, makes a lot of sense. So these sort of baseline data findings have gradually improved our programming as well, and we've established a few community safe spaces where older people can come together, can do sport exercises, can do community activities, and that is one particular thing that we would like to highlight. Whenever we talk about data, we also always talk about humans. We always talk about the faces behind the data, right? So it's quite nice for us to see when we get anecdotal evidence in terms of case studies, for example, of older people actually telling us that what we do is helping them. So the one response to one of the community safe spaces was that it helps that lady from Ukraine to actually distract herself from negative thinking and feeling down, and it helps her to come out of her isolation. So they're really, really great examples of how data can be used for good and actually shows the sort of potential that we can have on achieving social impact. So the sort of recommendations that we want to whiz through, because we're running out of time. Don't reinvent the wheel, obviously. Just maximize on existing data tools and make sure that age caps are removed from surveys and frameworks, that there is particular aggregated data available, and that you not just aggregate by age, but also by sex, by disability, by location, and include all sorts of features that actually contribute to a very intersectional, to the intersectionality of things. Also, one of the key recommendations that we would like to make is that we should always aim to make data open and accessible to help other organizations and individuals to inform their program work as well, because it's been very, very beneficial for us, and I guess that's the sort of context to take into. Also, one of the few things that we would also like to do is take stock of data that is already out there on aging. So what is out there, where are the gaps, and how you can help address those gaps. And in that particular sense, we would really, really recommend and would really love to see if people come together and are interested in working with us, building on our existing tools, for example, because they're available under Creative Commons, and just simply get in touch. We're here for the next couple of days and also available online, so thank you.
Thank you.